Buju, Wago Shindigu, Migizi Indodem, Gazagaskwa, Jimekag, Hindunjiba. Today I'd like to share a little bit about marriage customs and practices in the Ojibwe culture. In former times, the Ojibwe did not have a very regimented protocol or culture around marriage. In fact, while the Ojibwe clan system was matrilineal, meaning the father's clan was bequeathed to their children, the Ojibwe village was matrilocal, meaning that women, for the most part, owned the wigwam. And marriage was really as simple as shacking up, and divorce was too. And in things like divorce, women had a lot of power. They could set a man's belongings outside the door. He came back from hunting, and that was that. He grabbed his stuff and left. Um, but over time, the culture and customs around marriage have shifted and changed. And it was shifting and changing from the earliest points of contact with Europeans. So the Ojibwe did not have the expectation that um, there would be a dowry or anything like that. It really was a very simple custom and practice. At the same time, prior to contact with Europeans, I think most Ojibwe people worried a lot about simple things like maintaining enough food supplies to get through a harsh winter and so forth. And for the most part, it was easier to provision children if you had men and women in the family. And oftentimes, because people lived in villages rather than in isolated wigwams, they relied upon their whole extended family and village in the production of food resources. But if, you know, a man were to be, become a widower, it would be very difficult for him to provide for his children and raise small children at the same time. And he would be kind of, to some degree, socially, but I think economically, in terms of food production, incentivized to get married. And I think similarly, a woman would struggle in the same respect to be a full time provider and a full time nurturer and raiser of children. It was easier if you had two people engaged in that effort within your particular wigwam, and even easier yet if you had a broader extended family. There were all kinds of things that happened, so people found ways to make it work. Many people did single parent children, um, you know, and so forth. But once Europeans entered the picture, especially the French had a custom of sending only men into the hinterlands and telling them to marry native women and cement their political and trade alliances with native communities through marriage. And that was a widespread custom. Even today, about a third of Ojibwe people have French surnames from that custom. And when that happened and it became quite widespread, well, then European ideas about how to structure a family started to penetrate Ojibwe thinking and space. And the French, in particular, had a custom through the French derivation of patriarchy of, you know, sending boys back to Europe for a formal education, then bringing them back to New France to work in the fur trade, where they would be fluent in French, English, and Ojibwe, and could use their brown skins and, you know, Catholic faith traditions and their understandings of those three languages to advance French trade interests. But the girls, they kept in country, forced into arranged marriages increasingly, and used them as bargaining chips to advance political and economic interests for New France and for the particular fur traders. There's a good book by Sylvia Van Kirk called Many Tender Ties Women in Fur Trade Society. And it really talks about how this shifted. After a couple generations, you have so many mixed blood um, people living and operating in native communities. There's really quite a bit of variation in how their lives are being conducted and how that impacts things like marriage. As you flash forward through, you know, even the end of the French and Indian War, and the government of New France and their army are kicked out of North America, they left all their people behind. And so the British hire the same people from the same families to run the British trade network. And only 25 years after that, you have the American Revolution, and the Americans are trying to supplant the British trade networks, and they're still hiring the same people from the same families. So these ideas about European family structure started to influence the way Native people think, work, and operate. Well, over time, you also have lots of missionaries of all kinds of faiths and denominations, and even Ojibwe customs around things like polygamy uh, started to come under a lot of social pressure. And so once you get to the reservation period, then that custom starts to wane and pretty much fades out by the time you're hitting the 1900s. At the same time, when you come to our present time, Native people want families and want marriage. And now the question becomes, what does that look like? What should that look like? If I want to get married, is there a Native custom around that? And so, starting in the mid 1800s and going forward to the present, there's been a lot of variation about how to handle that. So, in the ceremonial big drum culture, there actually used to be a custom that was more widely practiced where there were even special songs for a marriage conducted at the ceremonial drums, where the man and woman would each kind of dance into the arena on different sides, meet, dance around together. There was a giveaway, a prayer that was incorporated into the ceremonial drums. I have not seen that done um, in all of my life, over 50 years in the circle. So it's something that seems to be fading out as in terms of marriage customs. But I was a longtime mentor of Archie Mosé, who was born in 1901, and he officiated many weddings. And he had a simple custom where he'd have the couple stand in front of him. They'd have a blanket that they would wrap around the couple to signify their unity in one house. He'd smoke his pipe and invoke the spirits to watch over and protect them and help them have a long, healthy, happy life together. When I officiate at weddings, that's pretty much what I do too. There are other customs and variations. Some they actually use a tobacco tie and a ribbon around the hands of the couple while they're going to be married. There isn't a cultural requirement around rings. Even when I'm officiating a wedding, that's not required. But if the couple has rings and wants to wear them, that's fine. I have one, and that's probably a nod to the European and American mainstream customs around that more than something indigenous. But it's not something that supplants or undermines or hurts the indigenous custom around those things. And in the United States of America, being an official who can, sanctify a wedding really varies by state. So in a state like Minnesota, where I'm from, it's as simple as getting a letter, recording it at the county courthouse, and anyone can be a wedding officiant. And Wisconsin also has, for the most part, pretty liberal requirements about who can officiate at a wedding. Some of the states, in the Bible Belt require like a degree from an, ecumenical institute or church of some kind in order to officiate and sanctify a wedding. But all 50 states do have legal civil unions that are authorized through courts and so forth too. So it depends on where you live, if you got to jump through extra hoops and get somebody to legally sanction a wedding, or if you can have your tribal cultural officiant do that for you. But there is a way to do it. And there's quite a bit of variation with the customs about how the ceremony would go. Some people use powwow drum or hand drum kind of as an honor song for the couple as well. That's not required, but it's something that a lot of people choose to do too. And there's a little bit about the history and customs about marriage and weddings today. Miigwech. Thanks for watching today. I'm Anton Troyer. Let's keep in touch. I'm active on social media, and my website has lots of information on my books, speaking engagements, free Ojibwe language resources, resources for teachers, and more. Miigwech.